Black Americans have been used for decades by Marxists to try to create division and unrest in America.
Mr. Reagan.
The reason that they're doing this is because the theory of the Marxists is that if you can utterly destroy a country, if you can raze it to the ground, absolutely obliterate it structurally and physically, then out of the ashes, you can create a new, beautiful Marxist utopia. And we are seeing the effects of that today. The marches in the streets, the Black Lives Matter movement, Antifa, these are all products of Marxist interference in America for decades. This is the culmination of all of those Marxist efforts. A new bill in Washington is trying to invade your privacy. It's called the Lawful Access to Encrypted Data Act. And if passed, this will be the end of warrant-proof encryption, meaning that both you and I will not have privacy from the government, even encrypted data. Using a VPN will hide your location online, stop advertisers from creating a profile about you, and allow you to surf the web anonymously. I partnered with Virtual Shield to exclusively give Mr. Reagan fans 50% off any VPN plan on virtualshield.com. Go to virtualshield.com/Mr. Reagan to start protecting yourself online today, or click the link in the description below. So in the early 20th century, the Bolshevik Revolution, the October Revolution in Russia, brought the communists to power and Vladimir Lenin. They were able to create resentment among the people against the aristocracy. The aristocracy was this very rich layer of Russians at the very top, and then everybody else was relatively poor. And they said every Russian can divide up the wealth of the country. It doesn't need to be in the hands of these super rich, wealthy aristocrats. And the people went, that was a great idea. Let's do that. And so they created this communist utopia that was the Soviet Union. Very soon after that, Vladimir Lenin thought, okay, let's spread this throughout the world. So he created an organization called Comintern, right? It stood for Communist International. So Comintern was designed to train Marxists within a country to create unrest and then Marxist revolution from within. Now, the Marxists had a problem with America specifically. America didn't have a huge underclass and a thin layer of aristocrats on top. We didn't have the same class structure as other nations. We had some poor people, quite a few rich people, and a massive middle class. And the middle class were relatively happy. So the Russians couldn't target America in the same way they targeted other nations. So in 1928, there was a critical meeting, the 6th Congress of the Comintern. They made the decision to target Black Americans. Now, what I'm about to show you is a video from 1969, and it was created by a guy named G. Edward Griffin. Watch some of the stuff that he says and just think about it for yourself. See if you don't agree with everything that he says.
Manin Johnson was a Negro, and he was also a member of the Communist Party. He joined the party as a young man because he honestly believed that the communists were trying to improve the conditions of his people. He was a dedicated communist. But after many years, Manin Johnson finally came to the realization that the communists weren't the least bit interested in improving the conditions of the Negro people. He discovered that instead they were merely planning to use his people, and these are his words, to use them as cannon fodder in a bloody revolution to destroy America. As early as 1928, the communists declared that the racial differences among our people constituted the weakest and most vulnerable point in our social fabric. By constantly probing and straining at this one spot, they calculated that eventually the cloth could be torn apart and that Americans could be divided, weakened, and perhaps even set against each other in open combat. Hoping to avoid further violence and bloodshed, the public is to be pressured into accepting measures that will move the country gradually and legally toward communism, but without calling it that. The strategy of the proletarian revolution calls for the quiet conversion of our government into a communist regime, but under the banner of socialism. The new program of the Communist Party on this subject has this to say. The term socialism describes but the first stage of a new society that in its full development is called communism. Socialism is a transitional stage. The building of socialism is the communist revolution in America. It represents the process whereby our country can be moved gradually toward communism without the people even being aware of it. We must not be fooled into thinking that the causes of our civil turmoil are such things as poverty, poor housing, lack of education, and similar social or economic factors. As a matter of fact, most of today's self-styled revolutionaries, black and white, come from good homes, could earn better than average incomes if they wanted to work. And in fact, they're products of some of the finest institutions of higher learning. Now, in passing, ladies and gentlemen, you may have wondered why the Communist Party has been a staunch supporter of the drive to place a black studies curriculum into our high schools and colleges. Well, the reason becomes obvious the minute you take a look at the textbooks and the study guides. Under the guise of academic balance, these courses have become a brilliant device for conditioning young people to accept still one more part of the total program for revolution. We must discover the identity of those individuals, both above and below, who consciously are furthering the communist program for revolution, and then remove them from their positions of trust and leadership. Now, of course, the minute you begin to think along these lines, you'll become the target of a whole barrage of attacks. You'll be called a right-wing extremist, a fascist, or at least a dictator.
I mean, the stuff that this guy is saying is totally applicable to today. And he's got all the history there. And the guy that he mentioned, Manin Johnson, you can look this guy up. That book exists. That dude is like totally legit. And he understood that the black community was being manipulated by Soviet Marxism in order to create civil unrest here in America. And he is the source for a lot of this stuff, this guy, Manin Johnson. Let's go straight to the source. All right, this is a video that probably some of you have seen at least part of. This is a guy, his name is Yuri Besmanov. Yuri Besmanov was a propagandist for the KGB, and he defected to the West. And in the video I'm going to show you, he describes exactly what the Soviet plan was here in America.
Only about 15% of time, money, and manpower is spent on espionage as such. The other 85% is a slow process which we call either ideological subversion or active measures, активные мероприятия in the language of the KGB. What it basically means is to change the perception of reality of every American to such an extent that despite of the abundance of information, no one is able to come to sensible conclusions in the interests of defending themselves, their families, their community, and their country. It's a great brainwashing process which goes very slow. It takes from 15 to 20 years to demoralize a nation. Why that many years? Because this is the minimum number of years which requires to educate one generation of students exposed to the ideology of the enemy. In other words, Marxism-Leninism ideology is being pumped into the soft heads of at least 3 generations of American students without being challenged or counterbalanced by the basic values of Americanism, American patriotism. The result you can see, most of the people who graduated in the 60s, dropouts or half-baked intellectuals, are now occupying the positions of power in the government, civil service, business, mass media, educational system. You are stuck with them. You cannot get rid of them. They are contaminated. They are programmed to think and react to certain stimuli in a certain pattern. Even if you prove that white is white and black is black, you still cannot change the basic perception and the logic of behavior. The process of demoralization is complete and irreversible. The demoralization process in the United States is basically completed already. For the last 25 years. Actually, it's overfulfilled because demoralization now reaches such areas where previously not even Comrade Andropov and all his experts would even dream of such a tremendous success. Most of it is done by Americans to Americans. You have literally several years to live on unless the United States wake up. The time bomb is ticking. With every second, the disaster is coming closer and closer. Educate yourself. Understand what's going on around you. You are not living at the time of peace. You are in a state of war. And you have precious little time to save yourself. I have come to talk about survival. It's a question of survival of this system. I am now in your boat. If we sing together, we'll sing beautifully together. There is no other place on this planet to defect to.
All right, how about that? You can see what's happening now is exactly what this guy warned us of, is exactly a product of that brainwashing. Because you go into the universities and you train these kids to become activists, to become Marxists, and the brainwashing, he says, is so effective that facts will not, you can show them all the facts you want, they still won't believe it because they are totally invested. They're true believers. They drank the Kool-Aid. They're in the cult. And you can totally see that today. You can talk your head off to these, Black Lives Matter activists, to these Antifa people. You can give them all the facts, logic, reason in the world, and they don't care. They are totally bought into these Marxist ideas. And the really insidious thing now is that these people, they don't even know that what they're doing is a product of Marxist propaganda. They think they really are trying to make the world a better place. They are totally and utterly brainwashed. Now, if you don't believe what I'm saying, if you don't think that this is still a Marxist infiltration, let's listen to some people that are working to this very day for Black Lives Matter and Antifa, and you can see the proof of it, okay? So this is, let's see here. This is Patrice Kahn-Kullers, all right? She is one of the founders of Black Lives Matter. This is, in her words, what she's doing with Black Lives Matter. Listen.
We actually do have an ideological frame. Myself and Alicia in particular are trained organizers. We are trained Marxists.
All right, so Black Lives Matter is a Marxist organization, right? It is controlled, manipulated, run by Marxists, by communists. That is the end goal. The end goal is destruction, so that out of the ashes can rise Marxism. That's what they're doing. It's all about destruction, guys. There's nothing positive about Black Lives Matter. There's nothing positive about Antifa. All these organizations that support Black Lives Matter in Hollywood, all the businesses, you're supporting a Marxist takeover of the country. You're supporting the destruction of America. And most of the intellectual Marxists, the ones that are driving this, they're mostly white people, right? So the Black Lives Matter folks who are organizing and running things and really passionate activists, they're being manipulated by white socialists, right? If you're black and you're a leftist and you're voting Democrat, you are being used by cultural Marxists to try to destroy America. That is their goal. Okay, so what does this all mean? What does this mean in the end? What is the end game of the Democrats? The end game for the Democrats is destruction. The end game for Republicans is liberty. Make America great again. There is this accusation about Republicans that make America great again means bring back racism, bring back slavery, bring back all this crazy stuff. Of course, that's not what they mean by make America great again. That's not what we mean. What we mean is we've lost certain values in America. America has become less religious, less ethical, less moral. A lot of that is because of the Marxist infiltration, right? Because Marxists are atheists, right? They're anti-religious. They believe that you should be loyal to the state and not to God, not to your faith. I'm going to read a few words here that I believe best encapsulate what we mean when we say make America great again. Make America great again means bringing back dignity, Christianity, morality, ethics, family, dignity, patriotism, civic pride, generosity, integrity, honesty, kindness, respect, and maybe most importantly, gratitude. Now, before I go, I would like to show you a video of an old man. This is a video that I saw on Twitter the other day, and I thought it beautifully encapsulated what we mean when we say, make America great again. All right, well, that's it for me. And remember, it's not that our liberal friends are ignorant. It's just they know so much that isn't so. Good night.
Not too long ago, two friends of mine were talking to a Cuban refugee. And in the midst of his story, one of my friends turned to the other and said, "We don't know how lucky we are." And the Cuban stopped and said, "How lucky you are. I had some place to escape to." And in that sentence, he told us the entire story. If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth.